And then what do? You shut the fuck up.
I'm also going to pause my alerts. Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Okay, Lauren, it is impossible to get your attention.
Yeah. I have ADHD, and I did not take my meds today.
It's okay. I went and grabbed Sansol. I put him in a group chat so you didn't boomer it up. So yeah, here, I'll leave you guys. I'll just mute. Have fun, kids.
Sick. It's nice to meet you. I had some guy named Skolander in my chat saying hi, and I thought it was you because it sounded vaguely similar. So then I promised my chat we'd talk. Made it happen.
Yeah, no, it's I've never heard of Skolander, but
he's just like literally a random user that's getting a lot of attention right now.
I gotcha. So let me see here. How's it going? I've been watching so much of your content. I have watched probably, I think, 20 hours of Lauren Southern videos.
No way. That would be a first. Most people I talk to just spout a bunch of disinformation about things I've said or done at me that have never watched my content, getting very upset. So it's actually nice to hear you've watched my content.
Yeah, that actually is what's been irritating me, because I'm pretty far left, but when I see people come up and argue against you, and then you're like, I don't really believe that anymore, or like, that's not really what my position is, or worse, that's not what happened at all, or I've never believed that, right? It makes everyone on the left look fucking stupid as shit. And, it makes it to where I don't know if you're the evil Nazi queen that everyone's been telling me you are, or if you're, just kind of like a centrist that's been misunderstood. So I had to look up a lot of shit here.
Well, okay, just a little moderator thing. There's another person that was on Twitch that has the Nazi Barbie Queen title. So it's unfair.
Who's that?
Two of them can't have it.
Who's that? What? It's mine.
Nope.
Whose was it?
Okay, so there's a difference. You had like alt-right beliefs. This person platforms literal JQers and neo-Nazis like on the regular.
Oh, but everyone, it's
the guy Destiny
fought. Now. It's a meme in my chat.
The guy Destiny fought with Mio, the JQer.
Oh,
is he Nazi Queen?
The blonde lady in the video with him is the Nazi queen. Samantha, did you actually hear anything about her being on my stream? Not last night, but the night before.
I don't know. I heard she was banned from Twitch.
Apparently, I lost my entire identity on this website.
I mean, hey, over the course of this conversation, if you want to, you can take it back. I don't think that you will, though.
Let's not try that.
Okay, I did have something I wanted to mention. I've told this to my chat before. I actually really enjoy talking to progressives because I've spent so much time in right-wing communities that it's nice for me to actually hear new ideas and new perspectives on things that I haven't heard before. Sometimes it's absolutely infuriating, and there are certain progressives that I just cannot talk to, and they're the ones you just mentioned that won't even watch my content, that just want me to cry on the ground and apologize for things I've never done before. Those people will absolutely rage about. Yes, precisely. I had a bit of a rant about him earlier. But it's really difficult because I am, believe it or not, I am very introspective, and I do like to consider what I may be thinking wrong, what I may be doing wrong. And it can be really difficult to take criticism from progressives when so much of it is complete misinformation or making assumptions about my views that I've never had. So I'm like, I really actually want criticism from you guys. Like, how am I lacking in my communication, reaching out to you? Where are we disagreeing? And then they're like, well, we disagree because you want to kill all black people, Lauren. And I'm like, whoa. Like, what?
Yeah. You know what? So I don't really have like the intention to come in here and debate you, because part of what my problem is that I wanted to debate you. I'm one of those debate bros on the internet. You're supposed to be the Nazi queen. I want to, get a slice of that, right? I want to get the clout by taking down the ultimate Nazi on the internet. But every single time I started looking up something that people said that you did, it was either, semi half truths, or some of them were just like not true, right? So then I kept on seeing people go up to debate you and all that stuff that I said earlier. So this is
I
this
respect
is what I
that.
kind of want to do is
Yep.
yeah. Let me pull up my little notepad here. I have a couple of things that I want to ask, and we'll just kind of see how conversation flows from there. So what I basically want to get what your opinions are on things so that I can debate you later and take you down so I can get all the clout.
Right, of course. So I'm helping you with your debate prep against Lauren
course.
Southern. I respect that. Usually people go to Destiny for that. You're just going straight to the source. That's way smarter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a subversive tactic. You know, my shifty leftiness is coming
I
through.
love that. I respect this way more.
So, to what degree do you still agree with your opinions that you had while making your more spicy content back in like 2017?
Well, you'd really have to be specific about
Sure.
which specific content.
But sure, yeah, and I have some like more specific questions. I would say, like in general, do you think that you've moderated to like a good degree, or just like you just are able to see other people's perspectives more now?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the phrasing moderated, because it's not like I've chosen to, okay, I'm going to go be more near the fence now. It's like I've grown in my perspectives and seeing more of the world, and I've met more people, lived more life, and that's given me a more nuanced view of the world. In some ways, that has cemented some views I've had before, and in other ways, that has made me reconsider views I've had before. But that's why I get really frustrated when people, like, they expect this, or they talk to me and they're like, wow, you're like a lot nicer, for example, when you talk about, I don't know, like transgender issues or something. And I'm like, yeah, I still generally have a lot of contentions with the perspective of, transgenderism in sports and what does this ideology mean. But I don't think it's very helpful to just like, all right, let's completely like just be fucking abusive towards these people in a lot of cases that have mental health issues and are really struggling. And that's just an aspect of maturity. That has nothing to do with me even being conservative, right? I think that probably happens amongst people that are left-wing and grow up a bit too. So I have changed my views on some things, but you'd have to name a specific video because it's so nuanced in some cases, and it's so specific, and sometimes hasn't even changed my conclusions, but has changed my approach or my prescriptions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel the same way about my opinions. I used to be like an ultra commie. Stalin was misunderstood, and
yes.
And then I grew the fuck up, and now I'm much more based. So I understand what you're saying there. Let's see here. So let's get more specific. So you used to identify as a white identitarian, is that correct? Nope. Okay, so can you explain some of that for me? Like, what would you have described yourself before?
So I filmed with so first of all, I'll let you know, I do not believe in the idea of what a lot of white nationalists describe today as like this white unity, or like we need to have a white ethno-state or something. I think that there are individual cultures of people that have white skin that have unique aspects of their society, familial history and language that I think is really worth preserving and talking about preserving, the same way we talk about preserving indigenous cultures in Canada and America. But those are like individual people groups. It's like, I swear, people who talk about, people can just literally unite under a country because they are all pale. They've never even looked into Balkan politics for one moment in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
Like literally you can live on one side of the Croatian border and the other side of the Serbian and be really close driving distance and want to kill the other person and have completely different perspectives on history and all these different things, right? So I think that there is a big misunderstanding of what I view as what we need to preserve. I think that there is an ethnic aspect to some of the preservation talk, but that's only because there are like 5 different aspects of what makes up a country, familial history, language, culture, laws, all these things. And familial history just happens to coincide with what your ethnicity is in a lot of cases, right? The same way that when we talk about preserving indigenous cultures, we talk about, well, what was your familial history? What band were you a part of? Which,
Sure.
you know.
So when you say the familial history and the ethnic history, do you put any amount of weight on genetics there, or is it just more of a shared history amongst the people?
Well, it's a shared history amongst the people. I don't doubt there are genetic differences amongst, like, you could, for example, you can have someone that is half indigenous that still has a shared history with indigenous people, but is genetically different, right?
Right.
So like genetics is only an aspect of that because, you know, you share your genes with your parents. And, you know, if your parents are both indigenous or your parents are both white, you're probably going to have indigenous and white genes. And your parents are probably, you know, that's going to be what links you to your history and your grandparents and their experiences. And so it's an aspect, but it's not the whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. So you would never have called yourself a white identitarian. What would you say separated you from white identitarianism or white nationalism? Like, would you say that?
Well, like I just said, I don't think people are united by skin culture. Skin color. I think culture and familial history. So, like, you could have the same or very similar. You could look very similar in Europe, both be white, but you could be from Sweden, or another person could be from Greece, and you are going to have an extremely different culture and history. Extremely different. And you're probably not even going to, you're not going to have, in fact, I think a Greek person in a lot of cases in their history is probably going to have more in common with some Turkish people than they will, a Swede or something.
You're more along the lines of like each individual culture is worth preserving, and it has nothing to do with the skin color per se. And you're trying to advocate for the preservation of those cultures.
Right. And, that also doesn't necessarily mean someone can suddenly become German or indigenous by saying that, right? But it doesn't mean that that's like the main aspect. It's a very convoluted and nuanced topic. And that's why people sometimes on both sides, one side want to sum it up to, it's just white people. We need to preserve white people, which that, once again, I even had people in the chat that were like, fucking imagine trying to unite the Balkans. Like, that's absurd. You clearly don't have an understanding of history. And then you have other people that are like preserving a cultural group. That's racism. Like, no, race is it's an aspect, but it's not actually the main aspect here.
Sure. So if it's not the main aspect, and I want to like get this super hammered out, because the way that people talk about you, and I was not able to find anything along these lines, right? The way that people talk about you is that you're a literal Nazi and that you care about like eugenics and shit. I couldn't find anything on that. I couldn't find any...
Nazis are cringe as fuck. Like, imagine LARPing as Romans.
Yeah, I know. You see people today. Italians, am I right? Fucking pizza. Anyways, the question I would ask then is, if race is a small aspect of it, right? When we start talking about immigration, right? Because of course this is going to come up. To what degree does one have to be a German? Say they move to Germany from Turkey, right? At what point does someone get considered to be a German?
Okay, so I think there's obviously a difference between your like citizenry and your ethnic background, right? So if I moved to China and I started telling people I was Chinese, I think they'd say I was crazy, But if I told them I was a Chinese citizen, they'd be like, yeah, of course. Now, if I married a Chinese man and we had Chinese kids and my kids started saying they were ethnically Chinese and also Chinese citizens, that would probably make a bit more sense, right? But there's obviously a difference between your citizenry and your actual ethnic identity. Whereas it's very different when we talk about like being Australian or being Canadian or being American, because those are obviously not dictating an ethnicity when we discuss that nationality. It doesn't have that dual meaning.
Okay, so if so like the
So like, I don't think that I could move to China and become Chinese. No, I think I could become a Chinese citizen, but I wouldn't become. People could treat me the same and treat me like I have all the rights and you're a part of China, absolutely. But I wouldn't become Chinese.
Right, so over the course of like generations, right? The next question would be, a person moves there in the 1500s from Turkey, right? And their family has stayed in Germany the entire time. Are those people considered Germans at this point?
Well, yeah. I mean, we've seen this happen throughout history. I mean, if you're Spanish and you take a test about your ethnicity, you're probably going to come up with some more blood, right? And they've been in the country so long, they've actually become a part of it. They've married into families. They're a part of the same history. And eventually, as that happens, you get a united history, and usually things balance out. But I think the concerns of people today when they talk about immigration is, it's happening at a rate that the culture is actually just going to be overwhelmed and become an entirely different culture, as it did with, and I don't know if this is necessarily going to happen. I don't know. I can't predict the future to a T, right? But when these people talk about their concerns, it's usually this is going to be the same thing that happened to Indigenous communities in Australia, America, and Canada, where they still exist today and we do things to preserve their culture, but it's clearly, sadly, a dying culture, right? Some of the languages in Canadian Indigenous groups have been all but forgotten. Like we barely even, we're trying to put the pieces back together, and clearly they are not the dominant culture by any degree.
Sure. So that's
the concern people have.
Yeah, that concern I could hear it. I couldn't empathize with it, because the difference between like an indigenous culture whose language is dying because there's 1,000 of them left versus a bunch of people moving to a country, like I personally just can't.
I think the concern is that it's going to be, and I think that's fine. I think the concern, like I said, is that it's going to happen maybe even slowly. Maybe it won't be intentional, because obviously within Canada, you look at it and it's this is why I get mad when people talk about this is a deliberate genocide. Like, we can talk about problems with cultural loss without saying there's an intentional genocide and exaggerating. The same reason I get annoyed with people who say that there was an intentional genocide of Indigenous people in Canada. We can talk about a cultural loss and a cultural genocide even in Canada where it's deliberately mandated, but exaggerating things doesn't help conversation. So I get irritated with the white genocide people. So
in regards to
their concern is that whether, no matter how it's happening, whether it's deliberate or not, that there is going to be an eventual loss of culture. And like I said, I don't know. I probably made way more definitive statements about this when I was like a few years ago talking about this. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that is the concern. And I think it's worthwhile to talk about. I think it's worthwhile to talk about, well, what happens if a modern culture disappears, because immigration is happening at one of the fastest rates it's happened throughout all of history, from areas that are very, very different, not so close to each other. What happens? What eventuates?
Yeah, so you're basically referencing the Great Replacement stuff right there. In regards to that, how much of that do you subscribe to now in terms of it being like a major problem, or is it like, what is your prescription on that?
Okay, so I first of all, I don't want to call it the Great Replacement, because as far as I've learned the last few years, is Renaud Camus' Great Replacement theory had a lot more to it and had an implication of deliberate intentionality that I have never ascribed to this. So I don't want to call it that. I more so want to call it the question of how do we talk about, and what do we think is, look at him destroying all my hard work. Sorry, I'm in Minecraft right now. How do we talk about immigration, and what does the future look like in a time where we have planes, trains, automobiles, and people moving to countries and becoming a part of cultures in a way that has never happened before in history. And you know what? Part of the reason I have this consideration, and I think we need to have this conversation, is one that I think progressives kind of want to ignore, and is actually a very difficult question, which is the fact that humans are naturally racist. Like we are trying to push against that. We are trying to understand different cultures. We are trying to understand different people and see them as humans like us. But naturally, in that lizard brain, people are skeptical of different cultures and different people. That's why when people go to prison, the first thing they do is go full on lizard brain. I'm going to join the white gang for survival. I'm going to join the Hispanic gang for survival, right? When people are desperate, they get really tribalistic, right? And they go to the most shallow versions of tribalism. Sorry?
I'm trying super hard because there are things that I want to say back to you. I don't want to like get hard into a debate because I think that the like conversation is more what I'm interested in. Would you make it? Would you?
Oh wait, sorry. Can I finish that thought? Because it was just a full thought that I needed to finish. And given that, like that is a big aspect in human history we are trying to overcome. Even 50 years ago, people were like madly, wildly racist. You know, we're not even like 200 years out of literal, like full on, I mean, slavery still exists today, but like full on slavery in, or like, you know, we're only a few hundred years out from like full on slavery happening just based on ethnic groups or people being considered second class citizens. In Australia, it was only the 70s that they got rid of the whites only policy. So when we talk about that, and I think that we're almost full on going the other direction in that we're literally in some ways discriminating against white people in certain careers and certain education systems, but that's a whole entirely different question. But in looking at that, if we then have mass immigration that occurs at a rate that assimilation is not happening, we then give ourselves a position where we not only have language barriers, cultural barriers, religious barriers, but also ethnic barriers. It's been hard enough through human history just to get over the ethnic barrier. What do we think is going to happen when we have all of these other barriers without assimilation? I think we're creating a powder keg for disaster.
My question to you would be, I think that I had this conversation literally last night off stream, and I think in Destiny's Discord, just talking to some people that were in the voice channels there. I think that people aren't racist naturally. I think a more accurate term would be we are tribalistic, and we can be tribalistic against any line, right? So I don't think that I mean, I don't know if you disagree with this. Do you think that like the ethnic thing is what we naturally draw our lines against, or do you think that there are more aspects to it than just the ethnic?
I think there are way more aspects. That's why I mentioned the other aspects. You know, that's why I was saying, like, right. What do you think happens when we have all of these other lines, which, quite frankly, are more significant? Like, I personally, I probably have more in common with the average Muslim than I do the average atheist, as weird as that is going to sound to my audience, because we both actually believe in a greater power and these kind of things. But sorry, I lost my thought there. I don't know how that was relevant, but we have all of these bigger. Oh, right. What I was kind of saying there is that would actually probably separate me more from another person who has white skin. You know, I'd probably have more in common with a brown skinned person of the same religion as me or the same politics as me than a white skinned person. So there are way bigger aspects than ethnicity that divide us. And when we talk about immigration, where we talk about people coming in and not even being able to communicate in some cases because immigration is happening in ways or at rates that are not sustainable, where it's just full open borders in some places, I think that's a powder keg for disaster. And maybe I'm wrong. Like, I honestly, I hope I'm wrong, right? I don't want to be right about this. I don't want us to have full on ethnic conflicts happening in the streets of Luton or in Molenbeek or something. But I think that people are just discounting those concerns and that conversation as racist is setting them up, progressives as well, for failure. If you guys want this to work, you have to talk about the potential conflicts that could happen because of a lack of intermingling between groups and a lack of comprehensive assimilation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I would say that I heavily disagree on some stuff. But we can say that for another day, because
Sure.
I don't want to get like so confrontational that we can't get into like the rest of the questions I have. Yeah. I will say this. I think that when we're talking about the differences between different cultures and stuff, I think that a lot of people think that there's way more conflict that is going to be there than there will be in reality. I mean, I live in a huge city. I live in Houston, Texas, right? And it's a very, very diverse city. And the conflicts that I've seen in my city since I've lived here when I was 7 years old have been less along racial lines or cultural lines, more so along just straight up political lines.
No, I agree with you, actually.
Yeah.
No, I agree that that's a much bigger, certainly immediate issue. Like, I think that the political divide in America is way more obvious of an issue than any sort of potential ethnic conflicts of the future, of which, let me reiterate, I do not want to happen. I think people think that I'm sitting around giddy waiting for a race war. No, that's absurd. Of course I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
What I will say is, I don't know what in history informs you that there won't be these conflicts, though, and these problems. Humans find any reason to argue. And my argument is basically obviously humans need familiarity. And when they don't have familiarity or cohesion, they do terrible things. And maybe that's something we need humans to unlearn. But I don't think we have unlearned that. And because of that, we need to take into consideration very realistic potential conflicts that will occur potentially as a result. And you look at, once again, let's take it away from the ethnic thing, just on a religious level, groups that are very similar culturally, language-wise, they would have the same history, even same families in some degrees. Like the Munster Rebellion, I use this as an example a lot because it was Anabaptists just slaughtering Catholics and completely turning against them just because there was a change of religion in the community. And that's their direct community, people that they know and speak to, with just a change of religion in the community. And then as soon as they become a majority, let's get rid of these Catholics. So I think all of history kind of tells us that people will always find excuses to act terribly to one another, and therefore we probably need to minimize differences to avoid that. And that doesn't mean minimize differences that make people feel like they cannot relate to another person. So that's why, in my opinion, in a lot of cases, I think immigration has to happen at a rate that there is a reasonable level of assimilation, so that these differences aren't exacerbated to the point that what happens throughout all of human history, which is people turn against each other, so that doesn't happen.
I guess the last question I want to have here, and maybe we can come back to it if the rest of the questions are, because this is where I'm most interested in, but I don't know how far down we can run this. My question is, do you think that there are more than one ways to solve the issue of assimilation, right? Other than just slowing down immigration? Do you think that there are policies that we could introduce, or ways that we could have people in closer proximity to where the assimilation is quicker, and therefore the problems don't present themselves as easily?
Potentially, but we'd have to be having that conversation at all first, right? It wouldn't have to just be, if people weren't just dismissing it as racism to want to have that conversation, I think perhaps there could be other solutions presented. But because people are scared to even have this conversation, I think that, there's only really one side of the political spectrum offering solutions. In a lot of cases, progressives won't even touch the conversation. They'll just say, nope, never will happen. Discount all of human history. It'll be perfectly fine. Let's not talk about any of the potential downfall. In fact, I call it Schrodinger's mass immigration, because if you agree with it, if you agree that mass immigration should be occurring, then it's happening. And, there'll be all of these articles where it's like, white America is disappearing or whatever, or London is becoming a minority white, and that's a great thing. But then if you say, hey, let's talk about what that means for immigration rates, they'll be like, whoa, wait, you disagree with mass immigration? Are you a conspiracy theorist? Do you really think that, white people are becoming a minority in countries, or that immigration is happening at a massive rate? You're crazy. But that's the problem, is people aren't even willing to speak honestly about the issue.
Yeah, so I would ask. Well, I have two questions. I'll save the hypothetical for a second. What would you say are things that we could do, if you've ever thought of this? Like, have you ever thought about like what kinds of things might be done to help alleviate the problem of assimilation into a culture, rather than slowing down significantly or stopping immigration altogether?
I've never been for stopping immigration altogether. I've been an immigrant myself, first of all. I think that thank you for the biddies, by the way, friendo. I think that, first of all, we need to stop making immigration about economics. I think that's really, and I really think socialists need to consider this, because they're all about, we need to consider the human soul, what's good for human beings, and not just what's good for corporations. Sorry, guys, I can't focus on the game. I'm thinking. We need to think about what's good for communities, what's good for real people, not just what's good for the GDP. And in most cases, immigration has become about the GDP. And this is a horrible thing for both immigrants and natives of a country, where your only value is how many more bucks can you put into big corporation? How many berries can you pick for us? And then maybe we'll let you come to this country. I think that someone who, for example, is in love and wants to marry a person in another country should be considered before someone who wants to work in another country. 100%. That's someone who wants to become a part of the culture. That's someone who wants to be tied to the familial history of that country, no matter where they're from. I want to come to your country and I want to marry someone and be a part of this family. If we focused on immigration like that, where it was actually about the people and the community and people that want to become a part of the nation and, weave themselves into that story, I think immigration would be way more successful. But unfortunately, we've made so much of it about economics and about how much money people can make for a country instead of how much social value they bring. And because of that, the social aspect, I think, is failing in some areas.
So just as like a bookend to the immigration, the IQ, the immigration question, and we can come back to it later, but
the IQ.
Yeah, the IQ. If the let's say if we had like 20 million people come from south of the border all at once, right? Irrespective of everything else, right? But they instantly assimilated into our culture, and they like bought a grill and they were like shooting fireworks on 4th of July. Everyone's like exactly like fully integrated. Would that be an okay thing in your worldview, or is that something that is let's slow down there?
I think that's like such a big hypothetical that's not even in the realm of reality,
Of course, it's like an impossible hypothetical, but just like the idea that the assimilation and the culture aspect is the most important to you. Would that be okay, or?
In a perfect world, like my friend, in a perfect world, there would be no borders. People could go wherever they wanted. People could live wherever, in a world where there was no one that was going to immigrate that was going to be a terrorist, in a world where there was no, obviously, open borders, whatever, sounds sick. No laws. I'd be like a hardcore ANCAP in a perfect world, like F it, but we don't live in that world.
Okay.
Right, I have to go pee because I've had like 3 beers, so you're gonna have to entertain my stream for a minute.
All right, let me open up your stream.
I will fight with Sansel.
All right, fight me. I'm here for it.
I'll be right back, my friends.
All right, what were you saying about Nazi Barbie again?
Oh,
how do I mute
she
this?
came on my stream the other night and got absolutely eviscerated by Christian J. Watkins, my moderator.
Christian J. Watkins. That sounds like a weird name.
Why? Because he's black?
No, it just sounds like everybody you know what? Doo-doo poo-poo.
Oh, fuck. So let's see here. How's it going, Lauren's chat? I just opened you guys up.
His name is Sansol. I'll see if I can shout him out in the chat here.
I appreciate that. Hey, how's it going, E2 the God? Entertain us, pleb? What do you want me to fucking say? I'm a huge fucking soy boy lib cuck idiot. Someone say something stupid in their chat so I can yell at you.
Can confirm. He's even got a man bun.
Yeah, I remember who you are, E2.
Ah, here, I can do this. Here. Everybody go make fun of the soy boy cuck liberal.
Lauren did nothing wrong. Not so far in this conversation. Although I still like hyper disagree with her immigration takes. I think that there's a lot of nuance to the economic part of that I would very much like to argue. But my point here isn't to like go hard or yell at Lauren. I'm just here to understand where her politics are now so that we can
debate prepping Lauren so you can debate her later.
Yep, exactly.
That is super based.
Let me see here. Soy boy is too masculine for me? Hey, T. Baggins, suck my cock, all right?
Whoa! What did we just say here? All right.
Sorry.
I've only got 5 more minutes, so enough of me on the receiving end of all of this inquisition. Saundersol, is that how I pronounce it? How do I pronounce
Sansol, no R.
Saundersol. So are you a horrible communist socialist, or what are your beliefs?
Yeah, I recently think that I'm changing the label that I would apply to myself. I'm more of like a sock dim or dim sock. I think that the ideal, like utopian idea of a socialist society sounds great, but it's never been something that I've actually advocated for, where I go through and, say like we should round up all the rich people and, find a nice tree. I think that finding ways
in Minecraft,
trying to, actually address the things that people need now and address their needs are probably like the most important things to me.
Okay. So what do you think of like the bread tube community then, if I can ask?
Oh, fuck. It's such a mixed bag. I think that you have some really, really great people in there, and I think you have some real pieces of shit.
Yeah.
Let me think. By and large, I mostly agree with most everything that Destiny says. I mostly agree with things that
I don't think
Vosh
Destiny
says.
would consider himself bread tube.
Well, a lot of people, like, it depends on what people call bread tube. That's also a problem with that, is that I might be considered bread tube because I make political content and I'm a lefty, right? So
okay.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it means. I would say that by and large, I think it's mostly good people. Some people are a little bit stupid, but I don't think most of them mean. I think most of them mean well. There's a lot of communists on there though that are like fucking lunatics.
I was gonna say, do you think that there are a lot of like 14-year-olds being radicalized by these online leftist communities? And ending up going to protests and like ruining their career prospects.
They're all in
future.
Hassan's chat. It's okay.
I would say, this is what I would say. I think that there are some people that get radicalized, but I don't think it's to the extent. The fervor isn't as high as the alt-right fervor was back in like 2016 to 2019.
Sure, but it's
but they are still
kind of more acceptable, and they're kind of allowed to do it. So I think there's potentially more danger there.
Potentially, I would say that in terms of the radicalization, I think most of the people that I've seen get like super radicalized, like possibly I don't know how radical I was, but I would say that most people grow out of it like very quickly when their ideas get challenged. So as long as their worldview gets challenged, they generally go back to being like Bernie Sanders, sock dim or dim sock type people.
Right. I think, this is a kind of I think this is a really sad problem in politics, is there are a lot of young people getting radicalized in general, whatever side of the political spectrum they're on. And I think it's just, you usually have to feel the corners of a wall in a dark room to situate yourself as to where you are. And politics right now is a dark room. It's a really confusing space for young people. They're not sure what to think. The politicians in play right now don't seem to be solving any of the problems, and they're just looking to places that seem to have solutions no matter where they are. And they're slowly situating themselves. But unlike any time in history before, the world are kind of following their political journeys, and their political journeys are being posted online. And a lot of the people that really should be guiding them, that should be helping them find their way, are instead of using them for clout and condemning them and saying, like, I'm going to make a Vice article and get you canceled from your, high school track team for money, instead of, these are young people that need guidance, that need help figuring out the world. And it's my duty as someone who's been in politics longer, and someone who, I like, there are some of these guys that are 50 years old that are dunking on like online 14-year-olds, right? For making dumb right-wing or left-wing comments. And a lot of that duty to guide the younger generation and answer their questions, I think that's a big one. A lot of people's questions are not being answered. Instead, they're just calling them a bigot for asking them. That's been thrown out the window by the class of people that were supposed to be educating others.
I'm not sure if I follow. So are you saying that the trend that you're seeing is mostly people that should be trying to lead people condemning their audience? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So what I'm saying is, like, a lot of young people that got involved in like the alt-right or just radical politics online in general, whatever it may be, instead of people trying to explain, especially when we're talking about like 14-year-olds in some cases, or like really young people, or like being like, let's eat the rich kind of community. There are people like writers at The Atlantic.
Oh, I understand.
Politicians and stuff that could have sat there and been like, hey, let's talk about it. Let's answer some of your questions. It's my duty as someone who's been in politics longer than you to answer some of these complex questions, which clearly I must have answers for you for, because I think you're so stupid for holding these opinions. That instead just use them for cheap dunks instead of actually helping kind of guide the political discourse. And I'm probably part of that problem too. But
why should we have to guide them? Why can't they just,
because they're fucking 14.
No, why can't they just stop being stupid?
Oh.
Well, you have to understand the IQ difference. No, the thing that I would say is that
it's about the shape of the skull.
It's the shape of the skull. The thing that I would say is that
thanks for the raid.
There are some people that have that role, right? I think that in political advocacy, everyone has a different role, right? And when it comes to guiding people's, especially young individuals, political ideology, it's not going to be the Atlantic journalist. It's not going to be the like Vice News that shapes their political opinions. By and large, it's going to be online content creators, right? Which is why you see so many young individuals get sucked into like extremist lefty politics, where they're dumb fuck tankies and they take everything that their favorite alt media personality says at face value, right? I would say that it is the online media creators' responsibility to be more careful with their language, to be more careful with their statements in terms of like what is and what isn't reality, and the presentation of the information that they put out there. So, for instance, if you were to say like, we need to talk about black crime, right? And then you don't talk about literally anything that might have caused the conditions by which people live in today, and you don't talk about like solutions that might actually fix crime outside of just punishing people, right? I would say, well, you're selectively putting out the information. It's kind of like pulling out a single stat out of a study and not talking about the full study.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair enough. Yeah, context has become, or lack of context has become just as bad as disinformation. Right. I think that's the point. I'm so sorry. I've got to run because I usually just do these streams for 2 hours, and I know I have a family. I'm not forever online. It's pathetic of me to not dedicate all of my life and time.
Please.
I know, disgusting.
Well,
I was really lovely chatting though, and I'd love to do this again.
Yeah. I have a couple more things. So if you're ever down in the next couple of weeks to do a continuation of our conversation, I think that'd be really fun.
For sure. Sounds good. All right. I will see you when we chat soon again. All right.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye. Damn. I didn't realize that she was going to have such a small window of availability. I would have rapid fired through all my. I have
No. It was good.
Yeah. So I have. I got through 1.5 points. Fuck. But we can follow up and do some more of them later. I really wanted to get into the what do you define as the West? What is Western culture? But we didn't get to do that. Yeah. Well, next week, I guess. Or a week after. I don't know what her schedule's like. Did she raid me? Oh, shit. She raided me. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I was looking at my chat on this screen, not at the chat on that screen.